So we are live, and here we go. Welcome to Beyond the Fundamentals. We are on episode number 3 of Higher Harmony, here talking about relationships and what people might encounter, some thoughts people might have that might make their relationships better. Because you and I, of all people, certainly know what would make them worse.
We've had a few duds in our life.
So this is not our first rodeo.
No.
When in this culture we don't have arranged marriages or anything like that, unless you're going to Married at First Sight television show. But we don't have arranged marriages. So I think we could presume that most people start off liking each other before they start to think about saying yes and I do to engagement rings and weddings and stuff like that. And at some point in time, for some people the like goes away. And so you'll say I love you, and the love can become like a chore or a duty more so than just pouring out of you naturally. Right?
I would say that's true. Even from the perspective of a mother and my relationship with my children, there are phases and seasons that I liked them better than I liked them in other seasons. I always loved them. And you can't just get rid of your children.
Yeah.
So,
well, if they're not born, you can.
Let's not go into that topic. But yeah, we're growing, we're changing, as we mentioned in our previous episodes. It's a journey of personal growth, and then when you've committed yourself to a relationship, that committed growth together. And sometimes there are times and places where you need to reflect on the things that you like about that person in order to keep it exciting and happy and positive and all those fun things.
So, something you and I say on a regular basis is we say, I like you.
Yeah.
Like we say, I love you a lot, but
Yeah.
we also say, I like you. Because there are moments in time where I just enjoy what is happening or what has happened. Mm-hmm. It's kind of nice.
And it feels like we wear out the words, I love you. We use them frequently, and I think it's necessary. I think it's good, but sometimes you want to express yourself in a way that is novel, that is special, that it stands out, that it causes the other person to listen more intently and to understand from your heart what it is that you're trying to convey. And I love you is wonderful. It's beautiful. But I like you, especially contending with things that we have to deal with in this world. I think that's an important value, an important thing to voice over, and that I like you.
So yeah, and there's almost something obligatory about saying I love you, but
especially once you've made that commitment of marriage, for sure.
You might not particularly like the person at any given moment.
Yes, for various reasons. Yes.
So, I think communication is a huge point. So we were talking recently, we were in the car on the way back from our friend's house. Was it last weekend, the weekend before?
Yeah.
Weekend before this past weekend. And we were talking about transformation. And it's because the divorce rate is so high in the United States and with Christians, it kind of seems like people, as they grow and transform, they grow out of relationships. And so the question that I asked was, what would it look like if we could properly inform a young couple who was getting married so that they had an expectation of growth, so that when things change, they could grow together and stay together? Because and this is not a scientific data, but kind of what it looks like to me is that people who grow wind up changing relationships every few years, because they can't grow the relationship at the same time. And then people who have more long-term marriages, it looks like to me, are the people who have they have an arrangement where they've decided to not grow, neither of them. So
well, I don't think that's fair.
I know that's not fair.
I don't think
that's not fair.
I know.
But that's like an unfair, presumptive take of mine.
Yeah,
So,
I would say so. Because I know folks that have been married for many, many years, and they still are having fun, and they're still liking each other. They're having to discover what those things are about their new, transformed mate. I mean, they've tried to stay in touch with that. I will say, just speaking the things that you like about the other person sometimes reminds yourself what it is about that person that you care for. And it also communicates to the other person that, I want more of this. I want more of this.
Yeah, positive reinforcement.
Right. I mean...
Yeah. So, I don't know how to replicate liking somebody, because I'll be honest with you, at the end of my other marriage, me and my ex both decided, there's 52 weeks in a year and there's 52 cards in a deck of cards. We decided to write 52 things that we like about each other, and we did. Mm-hmm. And then we got divorced. And so when I find that when I'm dealing with you, things just happen. I'm bombarded with things regularly that I like. I just like them. I don't have to look for them. I don't have to search for them. I just like them.
That's very flattering, but I do, and I can imagine.
I'm not just trying to be flattering.
No,
I
know.
I don't know how to tell somebody else to do that.
Right.
But I think that maybe, like, I have a posture of curiosity toward you, as I have with anybody that I meet now, which I don't think that I had before. Like, as a fundamentalist Christian, I had a posture of, I need to get this person converted, and I need to behave and act and wear a persona in such a way that they can see Christ in me and get converted. And so I really had more of a teleological view for them rather than a genuine curiosity about them to allow them to bloom and unfold in front of my eyes. Like each person is a vast unexplored cosmos as much as the night sky kind of thing. So now when I look at people and when I look at you, I'm genuinely curious about what's in there. And as I see it unfold, and as I see mannerisms and quirks and little dances and saying things that I can imagine you saying when you're 5, but
well, if I could,
it's beautiful to me.
Well, thank you. But I do think though that folks who have come from very strict Christian backgrounds, where I say strict, I guess the term would be where our focus is saving the world. I guess too, we overlay a stereotype on people, and we don't give them a chance to tell us about themselves in authenticity,
or to just be themselves.
Right, and that's what I'm saying is don't
non-verbally
right.
tell themselves.
And I think part of where we came from our past to where we met, we had become a bit more wise in the fact that let's just observe. Let's not overlay a stereotype. There are how many billions of people in this world? I don't know if you fit this stereotype or not. So I'm going to give you a fair shake, so to speak. I'm going to listen and let you show me who you are.
Yeah, and I would say, and genuinely have curiosity about that.
Exactly.
Like open-ended curiosity. I'm really wondering what's in there about to come out. And I think if somebody were to ask me how do I like my spouse, I think I would, really the main thing I can tell them, like what you just said, allow them to be themselves. Don't try to force them to be something they're not, and genuinely be curious about what's in there. And as you see it unfold, it's enjoyable.
It is. And even those things that may concern you or perhaps may have bothered you in the past, give that person the opportunity to express themselves in that way, so you can reassess things. You don't. I still fall into that especially when I was younger and a new Christian. It was two buckets, saved or unsaved, and it was an assessment of everyone I came into contact with. And that's not to say that there's gray areas of those things, but what I was not allowing individuals to do is to show me who they were outside of that identity.
There's more dimensionality to the world
exactly.
than overlaying that binary thing on
Exactly.
top of it.
Because here's what I've discovered too. When you start to recognize individuals in things that they're interested in, that their strengths are, even if they are of other faiths or lost, if you listen to them and you try to see their perspective, you automatically get an ear, so to speak. They would be more willing to hear what you have to say if you're willing to see them as they are showing you. I think we've kind of gotten off the topic here, but
no, it's yeah, especially with a spouse too. But I think that extends. So, okay, I see. We have some notes up here, some things we talked about a little bit ahead of time, and there's okay, you're a woman, I'm a man. Do you like a man that's a pushover?
I don't like men or women that are pushovers.
You don't like men or women that are pushovers.
Right. I enjoy surrounding myself with people who I'm not having to guess what they're thinking or feeling, and that they would tell me, push back on me. If I'm coming at you with a certain perspective and you see a different angle, there's an assertive way to come at me. I invite you all the time to push back on me because I have a strong will. I'm aware of that. And
that's the understatement of the future. For those
but you seem to still
TV
like
land.
me though, and that's testimony of the fact that you can have a strong-willed personality. You can have someone who is different than you and still like them.
Yeah, like I don't feel attacked when I hear you express yourself, and to me it's almost like watching entertainment or something. Not to objectify you as entertainment, but I am entertained by what gets you talking and what gets you saying things.
And probably the accent too, I'm sure.
That and, I mean how I load the sodas back into the fridge. little things like that. It's kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
So you said assertiveness, and I think so there's like a spectrum here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
You could be very under assertive and too agreeable. Mm-hmm. And you could be so rigidly assertive that you're impossible to deal with. Mm-hmm. So there's like there's a place for compromise, but there's also a place to negotiate and a place to articulate things that might be something you desire or an irritant or something like that. And I think that underlying, if you were to, like, I'm envisioning the word assertiveness, and underneath it is the word truth. And so a person has to be willing to speak their truth. Like I ask you, where would you like to eat? Famously, we made a joke out of this, you know. I asked you where you want to eat, and you're like, I want steak. And when we never have this argument of where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? That kind of thing. We can quickly get to a plan. You can state what you want. You know what you're in the mood for. That doesn't mean we always do that, because sometimes I'm like, well, I really want some barbecue, mm-hmm. you know, and so we talk back and forth. Now that may seem small.
I was about to say that is probably on the scope of most marriages. Deciding what you're going to eat is probably not that big of a deal.
But it happens every day.
It does, and that gives you practice to assert yourself in a way that is compassionate, that's kind, but also getting across the point that you're trying to get across. And it starts with those little things. And if you exercise those little things, it's just like working out. And then you begin
That's a really good analogy. Yeah.
you begin to grow with this person and learning how to communicate to them and with them. And it's a process. And something so simple as where you want to eat compared to, are we going to move? Are we going to sell our home? What do we do with the wayward children? What are we going to do? And then getting
all things we've dealt with.
well, and then even make it even a wider scope. How you're impacting your community, how you're impacting your city, and then eventually, your state and your world. And I think starting with this, I remember when you and I first started seeing each other, and I love order. We've already, you knew that about me going into it. I would get up and I would make my bed every day. It's just me. I lived by myself. No one was coming into my room and would ever see the orderliness or disorderliness of my room. But it was important to me. And I remember you had read or studied.
It's Maxim magazine. Yeah.
What? What? What are you talking about?
I don't know where you're going with this.
No, I'm going with the fact that it starts with the little things. That's where I'm going with this. It starts with what... Oh, I'm like, what are we talking about here?
Well, I read this article in Maxim magazine a long time ago that said that if you make your bed right when you get out of it, it harbors germs and bacteria. Whereas if you leave it open for a little bit...
I'm talking about the military guy that was saying, if you do nothing else, get up.
Admiral, the famous admiral, motivational
make
speech
your
that's out
bed,
there.
and it's something as simple as that. And what I'm trying to do is,
He was Navy though, I'm Army.
You know what I'm saying. What I'm trying to parallel here is that it starts with the small things.
Right.
To your point, I don't want to push over. I don't like to deal with pushovers in general. I don't like to fight. I am very, very much a peacekeeper. And you could ask my children this. You could ask my friends. I like peace.
Right.
But I also don't like to be run over. And so start with the little things in your communication with each other in a relationship was my point. Likewise, my parallel was start with the small things in orderliness of your living environment, make your bed. So that's where I was going with that.
Start small, work your way
I didn't know
out.
we were going to go somewhere else.
No, so like, okay, say one night, I want to eat barbecue, you want to eat Mexican, and then I just defer to your option. One night, not a big deal. Maybe the next night we go where I want, but maybe for 6 months, I never voice my opinion and we just keep going to Mexican. Now, after those 6 months, I keep deferring to you, but I don't. It's something small, but I'm not getting what I want. How I think it. How much am I going to be prone to like you after constantly giving in to you and never asserting for what I want? You see, I think even though you, like a guy, will tend to think he's doing the right thing by giving his spouse her way, or vice versa. Over time, you can make you resentful. And you can start to resent. Too much agreeableness can make you resent that person. And you get resentful and bitter. And by time 6 months of this thing has gone by, or some cases we read where 20 years of it has gone by, it's not a small thing anymore. It's not a small thing. It becomes this huge thing. And then the confrontation, you haven't built up any skill. Like you said, you build up this skill of negotiating and asserting yourself with the person on the smaller things. And then when there's a big thing, you don't know how to handle yourself. So if I can't agree what kind of plates I like or where I want to eat dinner or what we want to cook for dinner or something like that, when it comes time to buy a vehicle or a house or decide where we want to go on vacation or what career option we're going to do or who's going to pay for the $700 electricity bill, if we don't have practice dealing with each other, we're going to fail miserably at the thing that must be dealt with.
Yeah.
And it could come between us.
It could. Now, to your viewers who are sitting here saying, well, y'all have only been married just a few years, or to the viewers that may say, I'm already married, I can't back out now. You know what I'm saying? What would you say to those folks in terms of how to begin to execute this behavior of standing for, speaking up for what it is you need, want, which we've touched on this our first episode, but what is it that that lets the viewers know that being agreeable is somewhat peacekeeping on the forefront, but eventually over time it leads to resentfulness, and it leads to sometimes boredom with your spouse, sometimes
boredom,
sometimes devaluing. You can anticipate what they're going to say before they say it. So what would you say to those folks who are already married 10, 15 years in, and they love their spouse, they're committed to their spouse, but they've not done that well? They have either given in to what the other person wants, and they've lost themselves, or they've become aggressive and somewhat dictator-like with their spouse. What would you tell them?
Right. So that's a really good question. I would ask them, there's two directions I would tell them. One is to explore and one is to apply. And the explorer, I would ask them to seek out their resentment. Think about your resentment and what you're resentful for and about, and what it is, really what it is. Like, what are you really resentful about? And it may be difficult to hash that out and suss that out if it's been going on for years and years and years. You might associate one surface level thing or one thing you see every day when there's an underlying issue. So really suss that out. What is making you resentful? What is that? And the second thing is, start practicing. The best way to address resentment or pull out the shadow, like what is really in there, is to start, make a commitment to yourself to try to start practicing radical honesty, radical truth. You really have to say what it is you're feeling. I really don't like the fact that you sit in that blue chair all day and don't get any exercise, and I'm not very attracted to you. I don't know, maybe that's it for somebody. Or I hate the fact that I feel like I'm doing all the work around the house and I'm doing all the work at work, and what the heck are you doing? And maybe you want to think that out. Maybe you're going to write that down but not say it that way to the person, but you're going to say something. And maybe I don't like the way that you don't show me any affection. I wish you would show me affection. Something like that. And I'm thinking of examples of specific couples where maybe saying this could have made a difference in some couples that didn't work out so well.
I think timeliness is important here too. I think you need to consider what's going on in this person's world and emotions and responsibilities. What are they contending with already? Is your spouse in a place of loss or distractedness or just plain being tired? I would not.
Yeah, is there something that's impairing their ability to be at their best?
Right. And then, you can't wait till there's in many cases, especially when I'm reflecting back on my previous relationships, that, maybe there isn't a perfect time, but perhaps if you're sensitive to them, the situation, there's a more appropriate time that you can express that and assert. And
so if I could just get personal and make myself, I guess I'm making us vulnerable here by
I already told you I'm
trying to be honest about this. Like, we had my oldest daughter living with us for the past few months, since June till about last week, and because of various needs, and because we've never raised kids together, and because we're now dealing with the product of child rearing and a variety of other things.
Yeah, to clarify, she's a young adult of legal age.
Right. So So there's a variety of influences, some of which many of which we have no control over at this point, that change things around here, like drastically. So we kind of got you, and we just live here by ourselves, and unless the younger kids are here, and whenever they come, and so it kind of disrupted our rhythm and our flow. And you would think that's not a big deal, but it kind of adds up over time. Well, after a few months, the stress level of kind of not really having a place to go where you can completely decompress, it adds up.
It absolutely does.
And so I can kind of read that in you. I'm sure you could read it in me. And if I come up to a place where I feel like I need something from you, like I would like to take this area of our life and modify it completely, or do something different in whatever. Maybe that's not a good time for an overhaul in a particular domain. Maybe I wait. Maybe we table something. Now, it's not to the degree that I'm hiding it or lying or being coy or something like that. I'm not.
And you're not going to hold it in to the point of resentfulness.
Right. Yeah. What's wrong with you? Oh, nothing. Well, there's some things that I think need to be addressed. This is probably what I would say. There's some things, and I think we did say this. There's some things that I think need to be addressed, but I don't think it would be good for us to try to address them until this little segment of our life is over and we have one less stressor on our plate.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So even though you believe in radical honesty, maybe the timing,
it's important,
isn't right. Like if you had a family member die, it might not be the best time to say that I'm gonna need to allocate some money for a new Corvette.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad timing.
Yeah. Although a Corvette would make things fun for a little while.
So another way to look at this is what you said, and say it another way. In the military, we had operational horizons. We had current ops, future ops, and then planning. And current ops was between now and the next 72 hours, and future ops was between now and 6 weeks from now, and then planning was like 6 months and beyond. Like beyond 6 weeks, and then beyond like out to whatever. So I think I might be able to make peace with you in the short term by avoiding a conflict, by not being assertive, by not telling you what I want, and being agreeable. And so I might get peace with you over the next 72 hours and avoid a difficult discussion where I have to be assertive about what I want and be able to make a case for it. So I can just avoid all that by keeping the peace, and then the long-term peace winds up not going so well. So it's almost like we're sacrificing long-term peace for short-term peace. And I think that we need to have a mindset of sacrificing short-term peace in favor of long-term peace. In other words, let's have the difficult conversation. I think I have this thing in here. Where is it? To learn to overcome the hesitancy to engage in conflict. Because there's a hesitancy. There might be a hesitancy. I may need to deal with something with you, but I don't know what the outcome of that is going to be, so I just avoid it. I just put it off. Just don't say anything. And then I have short-term lack of conflict, but that bad boy's coming back later.
Not to mention, if you're prone to anxiety, that's going to feed it. That's
right.
For me, and I'm reflecting on me when I have to deliver information that's not peaceful per se, or I fear that it may be received in a negative way. I especially, until I am able to disclose that information or share that information, I have this anxiety that just it turns my stomach, and it's gripping. It distracts from everything else that I need to do.
Right.
And it's very freeing to be able to approach people in your life with honesty, even if it may start a conflict at the immediacy. Now, that's where you have to bring your skill in dealing with conflict in, and how to, how to really put yourself in that other person's shoes, especially when it's your spouse. What does it feel like to be Kevin, hearing this information that I'm sharing?
Some perspectival awareness.
Awareness, but not assumption. I'm not going to overlay, what I think you're going to say. I'm going to give you enough respect to say what it is that you need to share with me in response to it, especially if it's something that I needed to share, that it was my own doing or wrongdoing, or it's, it's hard to admit when you do something that may be hurtful or harmful.
Right.
But when you do, there's a whole new freedom to it. It's...
And there's also a lot of, I guess there's a lot of freedom just to get something off your chest. Sometimes when you're dealing with an issue, we make the mistake of thinking that the issue has to be solved right then. Like, I have to generate a policy from this conversation whereby we will operate from now till the time we die, and then we'll avoid this. And it's not like that.
Right.
It's like maybe you don't solve the problem right away, but maybe you voice it. You voice the concern, try to define the problem, and the solution may present itself later, or maybe just voicing it. I'm trying to think of an instance. I know I have, I'm not good at coming up with particulars, but I know there's been many times where just voicing the thing creates a sense of solidarity with you. You've heard me voice it. It's been voiced. There's no real problem solving that's taken place, but I feel heard. I feel understood.
And respected,
And respected, yeah.
That's important too, is mutual respect for each other. Because when you deal with each other in that way, you may not like them for that moment, but in the end, the integrity and the conflict resolution that results from it, it brings you to a whole new level of, for me, it's brought me to a whole new level of, excuse me, of attractedness to you as a partner, as a husband.
I'm thinking of a spectrum of. I want to use a sports analogy here. So if you're playing volleyball, like you're going to go play volleyball tonight, and I'm going to go watch, and then I'm going to play tomorrow night. So are you. If you're playing an opponent that is markedly inferior to you as far as their capability on the court, it's not very much fun. If you're playing an opponent that's markedly superior to you, it's also not very much fun. There's this middle ground where when someone is able to give what you're taking and you're able to give what they're taking, and there's a close competition, that's fun. And you might not win the game, but it's fun. And to a degree, a husband and a wife, it just goes back to the transformation thing. If you contend right at the proximal zone of development in, say, volleyball, you're going to continually and gradually get better. And I think as a husband and wife, if you contend at the appropriate level with each other, with the right amount of compromise and the right amount of assertiveness, you're going to transform together. Going to transform. And so I think there's a satisfaction in having interactions that are challenging, you're challenged, and you both leave a little transformed. Because you're not going to stay the same. And so there is transformation. It's like all the future points of contention that you will have with your spouse, they serve as an inexhaustible resource of of identity construction for both people. And you constantly pull resources out of those points of contention to build and transform yourself into a better person. And so now, after 3 years of knowing you, I feel I have very significant moments and less significant moments of feeling challenged. And there's a really good point there. Or look at this different way of thinking, or look at this different way of living, or a different way of looking at things, or a different way of different kinds of habits to have. And then I have to think, like Elisha said with Elijah, I need a double portion of that spirit. Like this works out pretty well. I need to sit down and enjoy the beauty of the afternoon while I eat lunch instead of being so rushed to get back to work. I can pick up little things like that. And it's through contending with you on little, and we do it with light banter, and we pick at each other. And sometimes our contentions aren't what you would call contentious.
Right. Yeah.
Typically.
We know what those look like.
Yeah.
I don't think you and I operate in avoidance, which is healthy. I think we have to contend.
That is a struggle, though.
Yes.
I feel like I've been programmed to avoidance because of previous experience. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. We have to deal with each other. Yeah.
But we're very aware of that. Very aware of our tendency to avoid. At least my tendency to avoid. So I think there's a little role reversal here.
Yeah, we have a very unique relationship by my observation of others, by comparison to others. We jokingly, but there is some truth to it, stereotypically have the female-male perspectives flipped.
Right, and not 100% flipped.
No. And it's interesting because...
Like a 55-45 kind of
right. Thing. Just one easy, simple example is my experience has been with, this is very stereotyped and very general. My experience with men has been such that they shy away from their sensitive side, or they shy away from showing a part of themselves that may be perceived as not that strong, you know.
Yeah.
And you're unique in that regard. And that's why I said I hate to say flip the script of female, because there are many men that are in touch with their sensitive sides. But I personally have not had many of those types of men in my life. And so it's very refreshing to deal with someone who can feel and let themselves feel. Let you do that well, in my perspective. And so it's not typical. And so it's like, whoa, what is this? You know, how do I take this in? How do I love and support this without fear or concern or any of those things, just because it's not what my norm looked like? And on the reverse side of that, I tend to compartmentalize things sometimes, and
like a man,
like stereotypically male,
man.
And that can be a strength in some cases, but it could also be a huge hindrance, because I have to allow myself to feel in order to grow and to heal and to move forward. But that is typically a kind of a male, in my perspective, in my world.
Yeah, it's typically
I'm very logical.
Well, you're very logical, which is refreshing to me, because we typically can get to the bottom of what an issue is relatively quickly without having to peel back multiple layers of emotionalism and answers that aren't true. What's wrong? Nothing. None of that stuff. You know.
No. And I feel, and I let you know my feelings. Not to mention, I can't hide the feelings, because it just comes out of me, I think, sometimes.
Right.
But I do try to. No, I can't hide it very well. But what I can do is, and what I think is unique in our relationship is to look at it, like strip the feelings away just for a moment and look at very systematic. Look at, here's the problem. What's this first step?
Right.
Here's your perspective. I'm a pros con list maker, that kind of thing. But it also can be stifling if you don't let yourself feel through that process too. I don't know, where were we going with this?
So we were talking about the balance between when you're contending with your partner, too much, too little, what's the right level, and not to criticize you in front of everybody. Men are typically accused of not listening and trying to solve the problem, and you have that tendency.
I do. I know that.
And like it's fun, we deal with it, so it's not like a complaint or anything, but it's interesting how we don't fit the stereotypes, and it's kind of refreshing. I think we're both a little bit refreshed by that capacity. So when you're contending, so there is the tendency, like, you need to be assertive and state what you need, but agreeable people can be taken advantage of by somebody who is too demanding. Now, in some of the psychological literature and some of the psychologists that we listened to before having this talk, they cited narcissism, and a narcissist can make unrealistic demands and demand absolute rigid compliance of the other person, and not accept anything in return. And if they get met up with a super agreeable person, now what I would do is I would expand that. Instead of just narcissism, I would expand that out to probably all the cluster B personality disorders, because they're all self-centered in a way. And they all have certain demands and overlays that they demand of the other person in a certain way. And I would also tend to probably classify ideologically possessed people in that category too, of being too rigidly demanding. So, and I'm thinking of a couple of things. Like there are several people writing to me right now saying their spouse is a Calvinist, and they're so cage stage Calvinist that it's like affecting the marriage, and they're demanding that I believe certain things and act certain ways according with the religious beliefs, and that I'm having a difficult time balancing that out. This rigid, dogmatic demand for compliance to a certain set of things. And then, like, we watched Married at First Sight, and there's a guy on there who's like super green, vegan, kind of save the earth kind of person, to the point where he has these rigid demands. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a religious ideological possession, but it could be any kind of ideological possession, where it creates these rigid demands in the other person, where there's no room for compromise, no room for give and take. I think that being too rigid along those lines is a recipe for disaster. There's nowhere for the other person to go. You comply or die. Comply or get out. I don't know if you've ever been there. I've been there. The rigidity.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I'm looking at some of these, the degree of agreeableness is what we looked at, and then a spectrum of agreeableness and resentment. The more agreeable you are, the more you tend to be resentful. So I would encourage people to enhance their assertiveness. And when people start to enhance their assertiveness you have to start practicing radical honesty. And maybe have a filter at first to where you don't necessarily say everything, but start trying to say some of the true things that you might have held back before.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to rock the boat at first between you and your partner, maybe every area of life, maybe at work, with your boss, with your coworkers, at church. If maybe you're always relied upon to do a certain ministry at church, and suddenly now you're like, well, it doesn't leave me time for the other things that I want to do, so I'm going to say no this time. And they're shocked because you said no, and you always say yes.
Right.
Articulating, learning to negotiate. I have the shadow up here, and you can bring your shadow out, getting to know yourself.
It's funny. We use that term. I don't know how many of your viewers are familiar with the shadow, but it's that for the purposes of defining it, it's that internal piece of who you are that you have learned to. It may not be the pretty part of you. I guess that's a simple
Right.
way to put it. It's, in us there are things that aren't pretty, and learning that those things are there is very, very important to your relationships. And sometimes there is, there's a process of integrating that part of who you are with the part of you that gets to express itself on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's right. Integrating those two things is
Part of that integration.
calibrate that.
Yes, and you have to do that, or you're going to hurt people. You're going to run over them, or you're going to allow people to run over you. So you have to integrate it in a way that it's there. And I'll be willing to share an example. Sometimes I will get emotionally charged, for lack of a better. I get fired up about a situation. Maybe it's at work or a family dynamic that we're having to contend with, and I get fired up, and I just start just ranting, and it's like I've released a valve, and it just starts coming out. Very articulated, yes, but very forceful, and it could run over you, and I have to be mindful of that. But you've learned to recognize it for what it is and help me to integrate it by letting me diffuse it, and then hearing me, and then not fixing it necessarily, but hearing me, and then putting yourself in my shoes, and why do I feel that way? Why am I coming at you in that way? So in terms of being radically honest, again, there's a place and time for it, but understand who your inside, your shadow is, and how it may come across in such a way that would be damaging to the people that you love.
Yeah, you can be really hurtful. I have experiences in past relationships where I tried the radical honesty thing, and I would encourage people to maybe have a conversation like this.
Yeah.
And say, I'm going to, like, from here out, I'm going to try to start being more honest, because I think I deserve that and you deserve that. And what I need in return is a really heavy, thick dose of Rule Omega.
Or here's something that I find is maybe helpful too, is don't make it about you and your spouse. Talk about it as if it's a third party that you are observing. We have learned quite a bit just by watching other couples.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be always what the right thing is. We can observe and we're like, ooh, ouch, that's not the way to do that. So go at it with your partner in such a way that's like, hey, I considered or thought about, this couple or these friends, or and this is how I've observed, them contending with each other. Do you think we could ever get to something like that?
So you see something good modeled,
yeah,
or maybe something bad,
or something bad
avoid.
modeled to avoid it, and then be able to turn it inward for you and your partner to then self-reflect to see, okay, how are we going to navigate this? Sometimes that's a really good catalyst for conversation. Just get the topic out there, between you and your spouse, your partner, because
Right.
it may not have ever been approached. And if you are in a relationship, I know if you're in a relationship where you've already hurt each other and you need to try to mend and begin to grow this facet of your relationship.
Hurt each other.
Yes.
Because I heard herd and hurt.
Hurt
Yeah,
each
yeah.
other. You may have to approach it in a way that is confrontational, that is, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not trying to fix you, but I want to kind of explore this thought pattern.
Right.
Would you be willing to explore this with me? That kind of attitude.
Yeah.
Because I could tell you, if in some of my previous relationships, both marriage and other relationships, friends, family, and such, if someone were to have come at me and said, you know what, we're going to try this, and it took me by surprise because I wasn't ready to hear that from them, and I didn't trust them. Who are you to tell me what I need to fix? You know, we hadn't gotten to the point of trusting each other that we're in this together for our good. And that's what's really hard to deal with too, is, you know, you've got to have a trust there that knows that you're not trying to use me, abuse me, manipulate me. And that if you come to me with this topic of radical honesty, that it's not done in such a way that is manipulative.
Right. And then I think that rule omega thing is very important on that, because you may say things that are not exactly what you intend to say, and you need to be afforded the grace to kind of reel them back in.
Especially for folks whose vocabulary may be not as grown, or as, you know, there's so many ways to feel and to perceive things, and some of us, our vocabulary limits us. You know, we only know, you know, like I said at the beginning of the session here, saying I love you is great, but man, I wish there were so many other ways to do that. But my vocabulary, our human English language vocabulary limits us.
Right.
And so I think that needs to be considered, is that we don't always have the words for what we're trying to convey to the other person, and give them the liberty, help them form the words. You're really good about this, because I'll get stuck and I can't, I'm like, I feel this way, or I see it this way, and you'll throw out a word that I know, but it doesn't come to my vocabulary as easy. And so you'll put it out there, and I'm like, that's it.
And then
that's
you have a
the
way
one.
of making that simpler.
Right. Yeah, I boil it down. Remember,
Yeah,
I was
so,
a teacher, so we
we
boiled
were
stuff down.
Down to the 4th grade level.
Yes.
So I think I'm kind of seeing in my mind like this triad of things that you and I do that make these conversations easier. And what they are is this. First of all, first thing in the triad is that we tend to spontaneously talk about how we, like our relationship and how we met and how it started and how it's going on a regular basis. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. We like to talk about our first kiss and our first few dates and then the engagement. We talk about this. It just it's not like we sit down once a week. It just comes up,
right.
and we rehash out. It's almost like we bring to life a new aspect of it each time that we quite hadn't. You know, it's a little different aspectually each time than it was before. And it's like we're celebrating that all the time. Mm-hmm. So we really enjoy the fact that we met each other, and then we're also constantly talking about our life and how it's going, and it kind of seems like we're always celebrating just life and the way life is now, because it's pretty wonderful. Mm-hmm. And we are also constantly on a growth trajectory that we also talk about.
Yes.
And if I'm constantly having conversations with you about what my growth trajectory is, and I tell you, I think I need to start working on this some more too, that's probably going to be a lot less threatening to you than if I'm just sitting around all day, every day. Then one day I just bust up with this new thing, because I'm constantly hitting you up with like new little things that, here's the one I want to try to incorporate into my future self.
Yeah.
And so if I add a little bit of assertiveness or articulation or radical honesty in there, you see that as a natural part of my self-assessment and growth trajectory, and not necessarily something that you should find as threatening.
No.
Mm-mm. And so I'm trying to figure out how to convert that into a prescription for somebody else. Mm-hmm. Like how do you like your spouse? Well,
first off, celebrate the things that you used to like about them. Don't forget those things, That's one thing I would say. Celebrate the little things.
Yeah, you reiterate them, bring them up.
Exactly.
Have a toast to that.
Yeah. Don't forget where you came from. I am a scrapbooker. I like to cut pictures and paste and paper and all that. I think it comes from when I used to do old time bulletin boards. But I like to take the photos and look at them. And even now, I will take the memory books. Not that I'm living in the past, but sometimes it's refreshing to revisit some of that to see where we've come and where we are and to celebrate those moments. We, even in our short relationship by comparison to many couples, even in our short relationship, we have reenacted our first date. We've reenacted our second date. We remember these events, and we literally, hey, let's do a first date night. And so we make the reservation and we go. When I think our first Baton Rouge date, we walked on the levee on the river.
And ate at La Roca's Pizza.
Yeah, and so
bowling.
Right, so those are the things that we stay away from the Apple Store. That gets us in trouble. But go back to those things. Do those again. I encourage couples to do that.
Do you think that we could stomach a few comments here?
I'm scared. I'm always scared of the comments.
I don't know.
Of course, they could always turn it off, I'm not encouraging that, but...
Let's see what we got in the comments.
This whole YouTube thing is very, it's still scary for me a little bit, y'all.
Let me go up. Well, somebody said they're late again. Can you see that font?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
I can see far away font fine. It's the up close stuff I can't see.
We've both been to the optometrist lately.
Yes.
Jordan P. says something about striving to always find another person intensely interesting. Yeah, I think you got to bring something out of them that makes them interesting to you. I can imagine people who are completely uninteresting, but I can't imagine saying yes to somebody in marriage that I was not interested in at all. Certainly there's something there that can be rekindled.
Yeah.
Coming from an AG church, Paula, I can relate. Evangelism.
Which is still an important thing that we do, but there are so many other ways to do it rather than going to the corner and screaming at people, which I did that one time, y'all, and half of our group got put in jail, so I don't recommend that method. Yeah.
So, I believe opposite the track. Maybe he was saying opposites attract, but speech to text, I don't know. Similarities is what keep you together. You have to have more things in common than you have apart in order to have longevity in your relationships. So I think it depends on what it is. Like, we have things in common, like we both are Christians, we both like to be athletic and play volleyball. We have differing degrees. Like I'm more functionality and you're more feed the soul.
So we balance each other in that.
So there's places to balance each other.
But there are some similar things. We value many of the same things. We value family. We value education. We value growing together. We value, time. I love, time. If I could just have more. We have many of the same values. That's what dating is for. You've got to figure that stuff out before you get yourself wrapped up. And don't, this is going to sound crazy, don't be afraid to step away from a relationship when it's young, when it's not what's good for you, and be honest about it, and don't be afraid. That was very difficult in my, dating in my 40s is, I just wanted stability, comfort, safety. I wanted to deal with someone who was honest, and sometimes that would come to light that the person that I was conversing with was not that way, and I had to break it off. I had to break free from that. So try not to get yourself into a situation where there's the values don't align.
And I would say that correct me if I'm wrong, but I tend to think that women might be able to do that more easily than men. Because men are hardwired. Like, if you look at the history of mankind, if you adaptivity, nearly 100% of women reproduce, but only about 50% of men do. So the ability to be with a woman it's like men are hardwired to prefer that over anything else, and they'll put up with a lot of nonsense to be with a woman. They'll put up with a lot of stuff they probably shouldn't put up with, things that are against their values, etc., and so forth, to maintain the capability to be with a woman. Whereas a woman, I'm trying to really watch my mouth here.
And I'm intently listening. I can't wait to hear what you've got to say about this.
So I think maybe a man might be optimizing for opportunity, and a woman might be optimizing for validation.
It depends on the person's personalities,
and
too.
Maybe a person, it's opportunity and validation.
Let's just be real. One of the very first conversations we had with each other was I asked you to roast my photos, which for your viewers, if you don't know, it's a kind of a comic practice where you take someone's photos and you just insult them.
So the first conversations we had, I was insulting Paula.
Right.
And they were good.
And he was very timid at first. He was like, "Oh wait, I was hoping that I could have a date with you." And I was like, "I can promise you, my personality type is I would get a kick out of it. I can laugh with you and at myself. Give it to me." So some people can do that. And that's why I say the validation thing, of course I want to be validated. I think everyone, men and women, need to be validated, but I certainly wasn't seeking that in my onset of dating. Right. I needed to find my validation somewhere else,
you're a little different too.
Well, but I would say that's not always. I think it's as varied as there are personalities.
I don't know if you're a good representative of the sample. I mean, to me, you are. No, that's right. Yeah, we if you don't want Mexican for 6 months, then get up and cook her a romantic meal with candles and soft music. I just did that not long ago. She came back and I had some steaks ready to go.
Yeah.
It's quite conducive.
He's good about that.
To talking about differences.
Yeah, it really is. When you start the conversation on a positive note and you're showing and expressing love towards each other, then when you have to talk about those differences, it's a little bit easier. I would agree with that.
So, Arnold says placate is not what works. Don't just placate the other person. That's a good word too.
Well, it's demeaning and diminishing. Don't placate me. I take that. I would rather you disagree with me than to agree with me just to move on with the conversation.
And it's taken me a while to learn that it's safe to disagree with you.
Placating people, to me, that's disrespectful.
When you're with somebody who's like what I was describing earlier, where it's too far in one direction, when you're with somebody like that, I'm about to lose my microphone here. You basically learn to placate them to keep the peace, because there is no, I mean, like any conflict could result in a divorce.
Yeah.
With some people
Avoidance.
Like that. Or abuse or something like that. Pick your times to be honest. A daily temperature reading. Well, I was afraid of knowing the truth in my past relationship.
Agreed.
The truth is hard sometimes, but the alternative is a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
Bad truth is much more freeing than a great lie. That's a great statement right there. This is from Roberta. At least you know what you're dealing with and can make decisions. Jerry didn't even know this is happening. Well, this is happening every Monday.
I don't know if you want. We need topics though, because we tend to rehash conversations and various
Well, I thought about playing
modes.
vignettes, like from a dating TV show, like maybe from Married at First Sight, and then talk about what would be appropriate to do there. 'Cause
Maybe so.
That's where we have our
Yeah,
conversations.
it's funny.
We'll pause movies and shows and stuff and talk about, hey,
Yeah,
here's what
this
they
is
should have done
messed
here.
up. That's right.
My wonderful Cuban babe just called me for dinner. Gotta pause for a bit. All right, let me
Yay!
know what you guys are eating because I want to know. Give an example of this kind of information.
What
kind of
is a
information?
daily temperature reading? Tell the truth. Give an example for this kind of information.
There's a meme where you never saw that '70s show.
I did maybe.
So the wife
Passing through. I don't know.
goes, Red, do you think I'm smart? And Red goes, so is this how it's going to be today? You're going to fight?
All right.
I knew somebody once upon a time who every 72 hours we were going to fight. It did not matter what the topic was or what was going on, but I could, pretty much every 72 hours. 10 minutes of sharing how you feel about your situation. I wonder what they're, give an example of this kind of information. What kind of information? I'm not sure. Some of our stuff now. Some of our stuff is, it's rated R, so. Your wisdom regarding truth, Russ says to Roberta, would have made me stronger at the end of the relationship or hope of reviving the relationship. Being voluntarily ignorant did not work for me. It's in Jesus' daily relationship of communication.
Yeah, I think that's true with anything you value, anything that you care about. You have to have some type of communion with that daily.
So, if Roberta, if you're still out there, if you could, I don't know if some of y'all see that spam out there who have admin rights. If you guys could take those guys out for me, because it would be a little bit difficult for me to do it from here.
Yeah, that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's not what we're talking about. Maybe that'll fix it. Yeah, some of y'all who have that
Yeah,
possibility.
20% of people. Yeah.
Roberta had to run. Ask permission before unloading your feelings on your mate. Read Emotional Healthy Spirituality. So I think there's a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. So that's a recommendation from Arnold. Are they talking about discussion? Okay, no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about liking or not liking your spouse. Don't lie or tell the truth more. Is Ken watching with you, or did you scare him away with your chainsaw? I'm not sure where that's coming from. A logical wife. Ooh, what a blessing. Hey, I got one.
Aw.
I got one. Start a Mentors Christian Single Discord at Beyond the Fundamentals. Okay. I could do that. Somebody was talking about the $700 bill.
Oh, let's
What
not
was
talk
it?
about that. Let's not talk about that. That's not.
I mean, maybe they need to know stuff like that for when it comes to how people can help when they're donating to this ministry.
No,
If I get
no.
a $700 electricity bill, I'm living in the dark and buying food that needs no refrigerator.
So, in a
Yeah.
nutshell, folks, it's hot in Louisiana. We have an air condition, and we had extra people living with us.
Yeah.
So,
We
yeah,
had a $686
Yeah.
electricity bill one
yeah,
month.
it's
About 2 months in a row we had that.
Thank goodness we both work.
That is the greatest icebreaker I've ever heard. You probably had him at that. Yeah. Well, I guess they're talking about the roasting
Oh
thing.
yeah.
But I had a dating profile because my buddy told me about. I was all sad after a breakup, and my buddy in Texas, one of my coworkers, told me to hey, get on this dating profile, and I did. And it just so happened to be on there the same time Paula was on there, and so I got to insult her for
It was fun.
a couple of days.
I think sometimes those dating apps get a bad rap. I think they're only as helpful as the people who are using them. It was helpful for me to weed out.
It's kind of cool because you're dealing with people who are also looking for others, and you can kind of vet them
Yeah.
to some degree before going through the trouble of meeting them and getting axe murdered.
All right. Yeah, you have to be careful. You have to be, aware.
Yeah.
But yeah, the roasting, that was fun.
So if you're watching this and there's certain things that you want me and Paula to talk about or discuss with regards to a relationship, let me know, and we'll add that to it, because we have a lot of fun discussions. It is like our discussions are great, and then we turn on the camera and something happens to where it seems
I
like
know.
it falls flat or something like that. But our goal is to try to recreate what we have naturally and somehow find a way to capture that on camera, because I think it'd be really helpful for some folks.
Mm-hmm.
You got anything you want to say before we leave, my beautiful, logical wife?
I don't think so.
No? All right. Sounds logical to me. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you next week on Monday.